Preview. Preview.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. I love answering your questions, but you all send more of them than I can reasonably answer, so they get buried, and sometimes they get buried for a very long time. When I'm doing a question like now while I'm driving, I haven't quite figured out my model of doing videos yet, but like right now I'm driving, and so before I get moving, I'll just quickly find a question and start answering it. So I don't scroll down as far as I probably should, and it causes questions to be buried, like this one. Hey Perch, with the failure of the MCU and COVID closing the theaters, do you think Marvel is even going to bother releasing the Eternals? Nobody's interested in that movie, and I can't see Marvel even bothering to release it. What do you think? I think they will release it, probably on Disney Plus, as well as the theaters, and it will do all right, but about what people expect. So it's a genius level prediction right there. Anyway, sorry. I need to answer these questions faster, right? I look like a jackass. That's the simple truth of it. But no, I've gotten a lot of questions, not any one specific one, but a lot of questions around Amazon and this Comixology change, which sucks and is just a lousy rollout. Unfortunately, completely on brand for Amazon's efforts in comics in general. Comixology has had a number of different attempts. Probably the one that felt the most significant was the recent Scott Snyder set of books, because there were some legit big name creators and some people on it and everything else. But even there, they kind of almost immediately fumbled that ball by not really promoting what was going on. Scott's cranking out books. Scott's got a book with Greg Capullo. That should be 100,000 selling book, right? And Amazon struggles to really market it or do much of anything. I don't know. I don't know what Scott thinks or Greg thinks about how they're doing. And Amazon has this interesting way when they work with people to kind of, I don't want to say shelter, but they're like, look at all the things we're doing for you. And they'll kind of like, look at this hand over here that's waving around. It looks very exciting. But if you dig deeper into it, you're like, oh, but they're doing no, outbound marketing, and they're not doing any, they're just kind of relying on Scott to send out a newsletter telling people it's there. And it's like, this is pretty typical of Amazon. I'm not a fan of kind of how they treat creators and what they do. I think it's all of the sloppiness of others plus some dodginess of just, we're going to do amazing things for you. They do not, kind of behavior. But anyway, and then there you got Substack over there. So Substack has slowly migrated to the place where a creator will go and spill the beans on their former company for a while. And then eventually, they tell the salacious stories they have, and it kind of goes quiet. So James Tynion did that, went out there and he had some stories to tell, and then kind of went quiet. He's putting out a book, but it's unless you're a James Tynion fan, it doesn't really matter. Meaning it's not, there's nothing in that system that's getting more exposure to those books out there. Grant Morrison's doing a lot of kind of things in his newsletter. But again, it's just lousy how some of this stuff is working. So the questions I've been getting is, these things people have talked about as the future. Substack dumped a bunch of money. Amazon's a big company, right? This is where things are going. So what do I think? Where do I think it's going? Well, buckle up, folks, because this is going to be a depressing answer. So if I've got my crystal ball here, I think Substack continues to kind of very passively fool around. They try and get some comics out, but they do not know how to market or push the comics that come out. They'll do very, very well for people who are big fans of a particular creator. So somebody who is a Jonathan Hickman fan will go to the Substack, will pay, will get some comics, and probably be happy that they get, what feels like a Jonathan Hickman book that was previously released, on Image, and maybe selling 12,000, 15,000 copies, maybe. That's what's coming for Substack. There isn't a mechanism or a route that I currently see where they get to 50,000 copies of anything sold, or even 100,000. I mean, they'll have their subscriptions and people go in on it, and there'll be some money made. but it has no upside right now. There's no hockey stick of growth that is anywhere on display. Doesn't mean they can't do it. I don't think they will. I think the Substack has got one goal, and it's not a private goal. It's what they've shared with investors and shared with people who have put in money. And any of you can go look it up. Their goal is to grab users. As a typical SaaS company, they're trying to grab users. They went in for news. They got that. They've gone in for kind of commentary. They're doing comics. They're going to continue to stretch and find other options. I think they'll have some level of Instagram-like play integrated into their service at some point. And that's what they're all about, growing users. They are not interested in growing comics. They're interested in getting more people to subscribe to anything on their platform. And they will utilize comics and push comics as long as it looks like it's got growth potential in it. But I think even right now, they will continue to try and bring people in to try and migrate subscriptions. But I think that the picture that's being painted is pretty clear. They hit a ceiling, it plateaus, the end. And so I don't think anything major happens there. I think some of the advances and money paid to creators drops. And I think that those creators will slowly migrate their way back to Marvel and DC. Over on Image Comixology, same thing. I think Image has kind of a desire to do something in that space, but they do not have they don't have the core competencies. And also, I think that they, as a big company, their attentions are focused on bigger game than comics. So it's always going to be a redheaded stepchild. It's going to be a little bit like Marvel is to Disney, but the difference there is Marvel was established as a comics company. So even if Disney doesn't inherently care too much about the comics business, they're content to just let it run as it was. Marvel still had built up critical mass of that entity. Whereas over on Comixology, there was never that same base, and so now we're asking Amazon to take their attention away from, billion-dollar plays to focus on comics. They're not going to do it. So a lot of the creators there will migrate back to Marvel and DC. And a handful will do things at Image, unless Image becomes a complete and absolute dumpster fire over the next year, and they start, somebody steps up, be it a Dark Horse or a Boom or an IDW or some newcomer. That's what will happen. So I think these platforms, please don't misunderstand me. Please don't, if you're already writing your article for the news, it's Perch says Substack and Amazon, disaster, cratering. Please don't do that. I'm saying I think we're seeing the height of those platforms now, meaning they're not really going to grow. They're just going to kind of trickle away. And creators who are on those platforms want to get paid. They're going to eventually figure out that they need to go places where, there's money. As Substack funding dries up, they're going to go other places to be paid. Again, these aren't amazing predictions. It's just, how business works. I think that what you'll see is Scholastic is going to continue to expand. They're the one company that stuff's growing in leaps and bounds. I think you'll find a number of comic writers and some comic artists who will try and figure out how to get into Scholastic. A couple of them will get deals, most will not. And this is a place where particularly the writers for Marvel and DC, the Vitas and Dannys and Stephanie, people like that, who their work doesn't seem to really fit kind of traditional Marvel and DC. I mean, it's going to feel like there's always going to be this rub of like, this content doesn't really fit this genre, but maybe the genre should change, or maybe the reader is wrong. Or this argument is going to start to just get tiring for everyone, including the writers. And at some point, somebody's going to be like, why am I wasting my time making, whatever lousy page rate I'm making, when I can write something that's a lot closer to what I want to write over at Scholastic and be paid more? And so they will go and try and do that. And maybe they make it, maybe they don't. Again, stuff you will make it, most will not. But Scholastic will continue to expand. So there's going to continue to be opportunities for people to go in and do books there, because Scholastic is on a growth curve right now, a pretty solid one. Scholastic has wrapped up a lot of things with bookshops and mass market distribution, big box stores. So they're going to continue to do well, and they're going to continue to chip away at the overall market from Marvel and DC and the other comic companies. You will see somebody crop up, whether it's Penguin Random House, coming up with another label, or you will see some competitors to Scholastic who will try and do exactly what Scholastic is doing. And that will be another thing that people will get involved in. Marvel and DC will continue to flounder back and forth between two places. Place A will be, well, we need to do our meat and potatoes style comics that people have liked, but increasingly we're forgetting maybe how to do those. But that's what we need to do. And because we're an IP farm, and ultimately movies and other things require just kind of homogenous superhero stories, or the other one, no, we're going to buck the system and give the readers what they don't expect and do something new and adventurous and so on. And you're going to see them continue to waffle between the two positions. And what you'll see from the fandom, from the customers, is you'll see efforts like Rebirth, come out, and everybody like, oh, thank God they found their way. Hooray. Now it's time for a new chapter. And oh, my goodness, I'm so excited. And then 9 months later, it's like, hey, what the hell? You're going back to the other stuff. And you're going to see that waffle go, continue back and forth between the two. Unfortunately, the other part to this prediction is all those people who are coming back from Substack and Comixology, yeah, they're going to get introduced to a pay cut. You're like, what? Why do you think that? Well, because some of these top talents that had a pretty good rate before they said, screw you guys, I'm going off to Substack, when they're like, okay, well, maybe I'll come back and do something at DC, they're not going to get the same level of contract security. Maybe they maintain a page rate, but they get just a lot less work. They're like, hey, we're not going to sign you up for a year's deal anymore. Here's a 4-issue limited series at your old page. You're going to see this drop. And why is that going to happen? Because the big publishers have discovered that whether they're there or not there, they still make about the same amount of money. That's it's when you're publishing 80 books in a month. If you got the one, say by Snyder, the Batman comic with Snyder and Capullo that makes 100,000 copies, well, that's great, but it's still one title out of 80. And you could say, well, in the grand scheme of things, we could just have all these titles selling 50,000, 40,000, and yeah, we don't have the one hit or the two hits, but it's not worth paying exorbitant rates for that one big hit. We figured out a model where we can do it this way. So that's that's what I think is going to happen. I think these two major efforts, they haven't found it yet. In the case of Amazon, that's kind of crazy because digital and that market is blowing up in Japan and Korea and doing great. But here in the U.S., it just cannot seem to find its footing. Everything feels like a half-assed effort. It's like, hey, we need to do this. It's like, yeah, you do. You need to figure it out. Okay, well, we'll do like the minimal amount possible, as slow as we can, and then we'll just see if it takes off. And if it takes off, then we'll do a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Meanwhile, you have Webtoon Tapa, you have Shueisha, you have those guys like, hey, here you go, new platform. Drive 8 million users to it. The end. Like, it's just, I'm watching, I mentioned it in another video, I'm watching some of these companies work with Line. And they're just like, they're all in. When they do a comic online, they're taking top talent. They're not like, well, we're not sure if this is going to work, so let's like put like the lowest tier group of people on here, and let's do stuff that really doesn't matter for the No, they're putting out like top talent, big name, in continuity, like important stuff, throwing it online, and then they're like, well, if the readers want to be involved, they'll find it, and they do. Whereas here, it's like, Marvel Unlimited. It's like, hey, we're going to have some Marvel Unlimited comics. It's like, oh wow, are we gonna put some of the top creators on that? Well, yeah, maybe not. Hey, Jonathan Hickman's going to come in and do like a couple pages of a Wolverine story in space. It's like, oh, okay. How does that fit into the rest of the X-Men plans? It doesn't. It's just there. I mean, it's maybe a fine story, but it just doesn't. If you miss it, no, it's okay. You don't see Marvel like, hey, we've got this new House of X Powers of 10 thing, and it's going to be on digital, so you better buy it. Like you don't see that. I mean, Japan's been kind of merciless lately with some of their efforts, where they go, hey, here's this 8-part story, and if you want to read the finish to it, if you want to read part 8, you're gonna have to download this app. And some of the readers are like, well, that sucks. I don't want to download an app. You should just put it out on paper. This feels like really lousy that you're doing this to us. And Japan's like, yep. And people, sure enough, they download the app. They, to just finish the story. To be fair, now just so my point isn't mistaken, that sucks in my mind. I hate that on all levels. However, I have to admit, from a business perspective, if you're trying to drive adoption of a platform for future revenue growth, yeah, that's one way to do it. Make them go, make them move over. It's a good plan. If that's your goal, if you're convinced that this is a platform of the future and people are going to be resistant to it, don't give them an option. So anyway, uh, let me know what you think of all this below. Depressing video. Hey, there you go. Sometimes we have those. Thanks for listening.